Hello everybody, Struggling Nice for you. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about Firebreak, his lore, his personality, where he comes from, and some cool, interesting facts about Firebreak. But first, let's take a quick look at Firebreak, his armor. I got the Diablo armor, which is the last armor you get before Hero. I will let you guys know that I'm going to be doing every single specialist up to the lore where before you get Hero, and the Hero armor is the coolest lore, which sucks. Here's all the helmets real quick. I'm gonna show the bodies after this, don't worry. So I am going to be doing all of the specialist little secret things in one big video, so don't worry about that when those come out. Anyway, without further ado, we're going to be jumping into Firebreak right after I show you these bodies and what he really is. I must stress, I can't stress enough in these videos, you have to listen to the quotes to understand what I'm talking about, otherwise you're going to be either A, bored out of your mind, or B, confused. So without further ado, let's jump
in. My family? What's to tell? My mother left because my father was a drunk. No surprise, I acted out every chance I could. Small things first. Little fire here, something broken there. No harm, no foul. One time, he hurt sister pretty bad. Didn't mean to, but grown man was stronger than he think. After that, I set fire to warehouse on other side of train tracks from house. First time I get in trouble with police. Father let me stay in holding cell 3 days. Probably not want anyone seeing sister's broken arm.
Firebreak is a very interesting character. I don't think that is very disagreeable. He's very interesting the way he acts, the way he just all together thinks. But that's not exactly what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about his lore and explain it so people can have a better understanding. And so, to understand a character, to begin with, you must first understand their backstory and their way of thinking. I felt this way with every character. I've said it with Reaper, I've said it with Prophet, I've said it with just about every character I've done so far, soon to be Ruin and Sparrow, or Outrider. So this isn't just like a one-two thing, this is something you need to understand. So we get a bit of both in this quote, which is interesting because most quotes have one or the other, and Firebreak is definitely a pyromaniac if I've ever seen one. He talks about his obsession with fire, which is probably the most important thing because it introduces us to it. It also gives us a bit of his life, where it talks about how his mother left him when he was because his father is a drunk. If you don't know what a drunk is, it basically just means that a person that drinks a lot, like a lot, and they drink to kind of just like let their problems go away. Well, I know quite a few people that have had drunks in their lives. Normally it's like an uncle or something, but his dad is a drunk, which kind of stinks. And he goes over how his like occurrences, I guess to say, early on with fire. So it started off where he just kind of was, you know, a little fire here, a little fire there, exactly as the quote said. And then as he went along, it became bigger things. One time he accidentally burned his sister, and then eventually he actually burned down a nearby warehouse. And this is important because it lets us know that he's now in the public eye. He's in the government's eye, more specifically. So they now know he's a thing, and they now know he's alive. He's like this dude. He has these things that are going on, and so the people are he's being paid attention to now. He went from being this kid that likes fire to a kid that likes fire that the government's watching out for. So you should probably keep that in mind for later on quotes. The next quote's very more interesting than the last, definitely. I find that's the way with every single quote, and it's definitely probably one of the more interesting ones of his quotes out of the three we have.
A few months later, after my father had passed out for night in customary stupor, my sister suggested we rid ourselves of the old man for good. Seemed like a good idea. I took his lighter from table and set fire to chair he was snoring in. This was when plan go bad. He woke up, screamed, and ran from room, knocking over spirits on table, spread fire all over the place. Fire is fickle thing. You think you understand it, then it begs to differ. Father ran from house. Stay till 17 when I get choice. Adult correctional facility or military service. I picked military service, where now they want me to burn people. Life is strange, no?
This quote is interesting because it tells a bit of how he thinks about fire, but it also gives us an idea of how his sister felt about the father, and some other things into his family life and more or less him. So to start off with, he talks about how his sister, right off the bat, wants to kill the old man. So I can kind of see why someone would want to do this. He's a mean man. He broke her arm in the last quote. Forgot to mention that part. He broke her arm, so this is definitely not a guy that she likes. So she asks her brother, who's obsessed with fire, to use fire to rid of the man. And so his original ideal plan was, okay, we're just going to burn the chair. He'll burn in the chair. We'll be all safe. The house will be fine. We can live alone. Be, friend. We can just live like this till we get older. Then we can get a good life. Probably something along those lines. But it ended up going wrong, very fast, and that's never a good thing. So basically, what happened was, his father got up and started moving around, running around, and this caused him to go to the fire to spread. And Firebreak, this is when we learn a bit about how he feels about fire. He feels as though fire is living. You can understand fire, or at least you think you can understand it. You think you can understand that fire is like this thing that's there. You can understand it. It's cool. It's interesting. But in actuality, you can't. And now this is this is more interesting beyond the fire part, because it not only tells us that he thinks that fire is a living, breathing thing, and he's literally like a pyro, but it also is a really good metaphor for people, and goes with people, because you think you know people, you think you know others, and in actuality, you don't. So that's where it comes from, the fact that he thinks that this thing, the fire, is like a person. It has feelings, it understands, it knows, it basically is just there to be, I guess you could say, it's a living thing. So he thinks it's a living thing, and it most represents a person, in my opinion, because you can't argue. You've thought once or twice in your life that you knew someone, and then they turned around and they were like, nah, bruh, nah, you don't know me. And it's a very interesting quote in that regard. It talks about some other things, how when he became 17, he had a choice between a correctional facility or military service, and he chose military service. And this is where that quote earlier where I said they notice him, he's in the public eye, comes into play, because they know he's good with fire. They know he has a certain connection with fire. Him to fire and fire have come to an understanding with each other. So they did what they did naturally. They made it so his job now is to burn people. Let's head on to the next quote.
The job I do, it's not for everyone. It's close-up work. You get to see what you do. You can't deny it. You can't unsee or unsmell it. Used to be, I'd RTB, and the smell of burnt flesh would be so strong, I wouldn't be able to eat. Doesn't bother me anymore. And as you can see, I normally get table to myself. I like to think I'm a problem solver. Enemy has you pinned down? Give me a minute. No problem. Choke point needs choking? Flame. No problem. Hostile sniper using a building as nest? Give me 5 minutes. No building, no problem. You see the trend? Fire really is that versatile.
This is probably the most interesting quote out of all three, not because it talks about Firebreak more, but more because it gives us an idea as to what he thinks of himself, one, and two, here's the fun part, it tells us a bit about the other characters in the regard. So without further ado, let's talk about this quote. So the quote, it starts off with him just talking about how the fire, he had some sympathy, he had some feeling for others, but it's gone. He doesn't care anymore, alright? One time, the smell of burning buildings was so strong, or burning bodies was so strong that he actually couldn't eat. And he was actually eating during this, if you paid attention to the quote, and he basically was like, that doesn't happen anymore. Alright, I've gone over that. I've gone over that kind of, I guess you could say, fear of being, and not be, or I guess you could say, like, he's just gone into sociopath mode, or he just doesn't feel, it's just become his work now, so he doesn't bother him anymore. Because his work is up close and personal. It's watching people slowly burn to death, so it's not like it's killing someone with a scythe or a bow or something like that. He's watched people slowly burn, and that's kind of scary. Next thing he brings up is he sees himself as a problem solver. And this is a very interesting quote because it brings up the fact that Firebreak is he thinks of himself as a problem solver, and he thinks of fire as a real thing. And he thinks that fire is very versatile, it's very usable, it's just kind of like, it's there, it's always there, it's very adaptable, it's like a human almost. He really likes to refer to fire as humans, I feel, more than anything else. Maybe because that's the easiest thing to refer to when it comes to creatures, don't know why, but he just thinks that fire has this sort of being, this essence that he understands, and you can understand if you get to know it, but it's not an easy thing to do. Now with that said, there is one more quote that interests me, and that's him talking about how he sits alone at the table. And that's interesting because no other specialist, and I have 5 of them done as of this video, and I'm just doing one at a time, looking into in-depth of their lore, but as of this video, I've listened to all the quotes I have, and not a single specialist has brought up like an actual place. This is the first time I've heard a specialist bring up that they're at somewhere. Before, it's always been like, oh, this has happened to me, and this has happened to me, but it's never been, I'm currently right here. So Firebreak talks about how he's currently at a table, which is interesting because it makes you realize that Firebreak is definitely a real dude. He's there, and he's alive, and he's at a real place. But it begs to ask the question, where are the other specialists? Are they real things? Are they figments of, are they just all in the simulation? Because multiplayer is a simulation, we know this. But do they know that? It doesn't seem like they do. You'd have to listen to other quotes to fully understand what I'm getting at here, but if you think about it, you can come up with really any answer because it's kind of an interesting thing. That's all for today's video. If you did enjoy, please like and subscribe. I'm going to leave that question up to you. Who do you think? Do you think that all the specialists are real or are they fake? That's all for today's video. If you did like and subscribe, and without further ado, goodbye.